Part 3, Chapter 6, Incubi.
Will you rise?
A cracking, bubbling voice, indiscernible as man or woman, pried at the foundations of my blackened mind. Blips of color and ineffable shapes phased in and out of my perceived reality. There was a low tone, deep and perverse, paralyzing. Then, light. A vision of scrolling clouds rushed by my insight at immense speed from every direction. An explosion of fire and electricity sent a wave of invisible energy in a dome, creating a pocket within the dense smoke, engulfing me as I descended rapidly without control. Spinning, fumbling like a rag doll, hundreds of miles above the ground, an opaque smudge of hues splattered my eyes and blinded me with the passing speed. A jolt harassed my inflamed body, surging from my index finger and shooting through to my heart. A drag pushed up against me and stabilized my motion, decreasing the overpowering descent and allowing me to face the earth below. The wind blasted my face still, but I could see something approaching. A house. Impact was inevitable, as I had no control over my body, for I was a slave to a memory. Raging gusts lashed my face and body, ramping up speed as I watched the ground grow closer in horror. Behind me, in the empty sky, I could feel a presence scream a name I couldn't comprehend, reaching too short. Just before crashing into the unsuspecting home, my mind was overcome by a vision of bodies sprawled out on the floor as a living flame swallowed everything. I existed behind my eyelids for a period I couldn't discern. A second or a year, impossible to tell. Spiritual and lacking perception, a conscious void where there was nothing and everything. All at once, I was awake in a room with my back against a wall, as though I had been forever. Pressed in fear, not knowing what form I took, I witnessed a shadow peel itself from a layer of nothing in the air. Sprouting lanky limbs in a slanted posture, it took on a human shape, distinguished indefinitely by the yellow glow of its eyes. The disturbing shadow relaxed its weightless appendages and started to sway. Misty sections of the ghostly outline were washed away like blood and water, remaining on the surface like oil and rain. Crying, I was crying.
I feel you awake.
Random layered voices equally whispered and screamed in my ears. Its skin peeled off section by section, revealing bone and blood. A sickening white sphere at the center behind its ribcage pulsed in fragility. Like a little sun, it warmed everything around it. The skin then reformed into a macabre tornado, reshaping the entire body into a new one. My mother. She was gray with darkened eyes and veins like tree roots spreading across her face. I felt the illusion tug at me, giving me an awareness of my own form. She smiled, and then the skin burst outward again, froze in bloody chunks, then sucked back into the same shape, this time with a hole punched through her chest, revealing a stopped heart. She spoke to me in a deep, pained voice.
Are you happy?
As if leaning in for approval, I anxiously nodded. Yes. Her voice changed to static, laughing.
Are you sure? That seems unlike you.
Her face suddenly flooded with blood originating from her hairline. She wasn't smiling. I watched her slowly drag her fingernails across her throat and peel the skin back. No blood fell from the lacerations, but once she reached the end of her neck, her head tilted backward and fell to the ground. The head hit the misty brown floor, and many thin strings sprouted up to suck it into the void. The neck stump did not bleed a single drop. Instead, a black bubble erupted from the hole and burst. When it did, a bundle of dark tentacles made from solid shadows burst out and extended up twice her height. They whipped and thrashed in the air, which caused her body to become unbalanced and fall over. The shadow slithered along the floor and attempted to snag my ankles. Another unique voice yelled to me from behind. Upon turning, the wall was gone, and I was met with the face of my father. The wounds I caused in his belly remained, and the gore from his neck shot out to the side in dramatic slow motion, like a frame from a comic book. He laughed at me. His mouth moved, but the words that he formed were nonsense. He cocked back his arm and threw a fist forward, but it wasn't his fist that connected with me. His hand had changed, morphed into a spool of thread with 1,000 needles pointing outward. The needles shredded my face and sent me crumpled to the ground, where the tentacles returned and spiraled around my body. Like snakes, they constricted my bones and left me screaming in agony.
I can set you free.
A familiar but unrecognizable voice whispered. Lashing around, I whined and begged, "Anything, save me." A lumbering, inky puddle rose up from the ground in front of my feet, stretching over 10 feet above me, thrashing on the ground. The bubbling black tar took on a thin frame resembling a decayed tree and sprouted a face that I loved. A face with big eyes and 3 freckles.
Kill. Save her.
The shape twisted again, spinning rapidly, then settling on the form of the old man, of Sin.
Save.
The voices screamed. I sobbed.
Kill. Save me.
Stop,
please.
In an instant, I became lucid. I remembered who I was, what I am. With the power of comprehension, my skin turned gray, and my eyes exploded into a radiant purple. This change allowed me to rip free of the shadowy bindings and climb back on my feet. The ink body shriveled to my eye level and molded into his crooked shape. He greeted me with a silent, filthy sneer and tilted his head.
Who are you?
He cackled. There was no hesitation. I took a confident strut forward and raised my hand back, claws extended and ready to strike. But something was wrong. All at once, the 2 of us were boxed in a tight room, and there was a soft whimpering coming from the walls. My expression changed to worry, and my bones became weighted. Sin himself lost his snarl, and his face went blank as he shriveled down against the wall, sobbing. Perplexed and more afraid than before, my hand lingered behind my head, posed to strike. The longer I stared at the shriveling body, the more I began to recognize details in my peripheral. A bed immediately to my left with pale gray light soaking into the blanket. Then another on my right, identical in every way aside from the color. A 3-drawer nightstand melted into the wall behind him as his appearance obfuscated into a pastel, darkened mass. A blink and the walls had texture. The floor turned to carpet, and a tender scent of fabric softener entered my nostrils. Screaming in my chest shook me and caused a retreat in my steps. My arm lowered while my feet stumbled until I could see the 2 beds side by side with a small walking gap between them. Headboards against the wall, and nightstand placed centered. In front of the nightstand was a huddled, cowering shape painted by shadows. A sliver of a face was revealed by a blue-tinted glow creeping from the left. The nightmare was over, and I found myself in a whole new, terrifying reality. Looking down at my arms and chest, I raised my hands before my face and witnessed the milky gray slowly sink back to my everyday paleness. The claws retracted themselves, and the filter of a vignette purple disappeared from my vision. A heavy panting overcame me as the power released me from its grip. Hard crashing into my world, my lungs stretched, and a sharp pulsating took hold of my brain. Tansu? I whispered, saliva pooled in my mouth. She sat on the floor, knees raised with her arms shielding her face soaked with tears and eyes screaming in fear, paralyzed. The memories from the day leading up to this point entered my brain like a storm cloud, drowning me with images and sounds of whatever completed the mystery. Fear, palpable fear swallowed me. I remember leaving school, coming home and throwing up for an hour. Something almost unreal crashed into my brain and left me empty, waiting. I slept. I know I slept. But that nightmare... No, I ushered. A snap in my head broke me free from the circle of thinking. My arms fell limp to my side as a tremendous sadness choked me. A whirlwind of every emotion I was capable of swirled around me. My eyes became bloodshot, dark bags prominent beneath, and a hot breath flowed. I kept trying to tether myself on this floor, keep centered to reality and confront this, but I kept getting lost, searching for my words, any kind of non-hostile response. A high-pitched, bass-filled buzz cracked in my head. Alice provided concern in her voice.
Why did you stop?
In my head, I struggled to even respond.
Was it me, or...
She seemed frantic.
Are you confused?
I jerked, visible to Tansu's watch.
What's happening?
I replied to Alice. She seemed baffled.
We were talking for nearly 10 minutes about the heat in the air, the pressure in your veins.
Stuck in this head fog, I closed my eyes.
I was dreaming,
I whispered out loud, ever so softly.
The sky falling. You weren't dreaming.
She seemed genuinely confused.
You stirred me, told me you were afraid of sin and what would happen when he finds you. I suggested we kill your friend for a last surge of power.
She admitted with a slum voice.
You what?
I choked in my head. Her arrogance emerged, but she was restricted by some culpability, so she kept her sharp tongue leashed.
I meant it as a joke. You said yes.
Cold, horrified, I focused on Tansu and dismissed Alice. My right hand twitched and began to rise on its own, reaching out to her. Like a cornered animal, she thrashed in place, pressing her body into the nightstand and nearly toppling the lamp over. I retracted a bit and hushed her.
Shh. It's me,
I stated fearfully. Tansu shook her head.
No. That wasn't...
Her arms raised and blocked her face, but the trembling receded the slightest amount. My panting slowed. Seriousness invaded me.
Tansu, I need you to breathe.
She kept her eyes locked on, but pulled herself more upright against the stand. One leg slid out and her arms lowered just a bit. The terror pouring out of her had an acidic taste to it. Bitter. A deep, upset sigh.
Now you know. No, I don't. Who are you?
Dejected, I frowned.
Tansu, it's me, Kim.
Her head shook side to side.
No, that wasn't Kim. Please, get away.
She recounted, trembling again, on the verge of hysteria.
It was me, and also her,
I said shamefully.
Her?
She questioned. With a clenched fist and a loss of my determined self, I bit my lip hard. My eyes caught hers and they froze like that. A minute of us holding an evasive stare. She could see me, the real me. The truth was sinking into her brain slowly. Her muscles began to soothe and her posture dropped. We disconnected, and I instantly felt a drain take hold of my body. Empathetic to her sensitivities, I held my breath and retained the emotion I drew from her. With a dry mouth, I looked to the floor, then back to her. Cautiously, I took it upon myself to take a seat on the mattress. I let my legs dangle between our beds with her on my right.
I've given this so much thought,
I stated neutrally, trying my best to keep my emotions under control.
I always knew you'd be afraid, but part of me believed you'd listen and not run away.
My voice was trembling. There was a release in the pressure around us. She started dropping her defenses, and the tears were drying, recognizing that the threat had subsided. Keeping herself on the floor against the nightstand, she spoke.
Believe
What? Her voice was frail. I felt a smile in my soul, but no physical reaction came forth. Lifting my head, I saw the light from the moon pour onto the bed from the window and focused on that. I exhaled through my nose. Do you remember, back when we first met, we were looking up ghosts? Yes, she responded quietly. I nervously snickered. There was something in my home. It wasn't a ghost. I looked at the floor. It was a demon. That got her attention. What? I hesitated to answer. God, I thought about this so much, but I still don't know how to say it. My hands gestured. Her brows angled and a spike of anger emanated. Kim, I'm freaking out. Just tell me. I bit my lip. The demon that haunted me was an old man who calls himself Sin. I felt a weight release and densify. Nausea in my gut made me twitch and twist my neck. Her face was stoic, reading me, scrutinizing every expression and every minute detail that could be picked apart as lying or insanity. I continued. A lot of bad shit was happening between me and my dad, and the old man offered me a deal. A deal? What does that mean? A nervous cough spat from my throat. It was a deal for power, revenge. And you took this deal? She replied, disbelief in her throat. I did, I said shamefully. Tansu stood up, carefully, watching me but equally as afraid of every shadow close by. She placed her hand on the bed and sat opposite of me, face still burning red and eyes twitchy. Her hands clustered in that weird fist she always made, and she met my gaze. She exuded sorrow, atrophy, and confusion. It was clear she felt stuck, unable to force herself to leave this room, but incapable of accepting what she was being told. She said plainly, You accepted a demon deal? I nodded. Her eyes shut tight and she rubbed them furiously before pressing both hands into the top of her thighs with a crude face. What was that just now, Kim? She asked angrily, still keeping her voice quiet. I was ripped out of my bed and thrown to the floor by what I thought to be a horrible nightmare. But then it changed into you. Hearing her recount that gave me goosebumps, followed by a deepened sadness. Her name is Alice, and she's my gift upon accepting the deal. I swallowed hard. Sorrow poisoned my tongue. She's a demon that shares my body and takes control when I lose it. Her crude expression switched back to worry. She placed her palm on her forehead and leaned back slightly. Her lips separated and pressed as beginnings of questions and statements cycled, but were never completed. I started to get emotional. Dansu, I'm so sorry. I thought I could control her, keep my secret to the grave, and live a normal life. My fist balled, and I slightly punched my own leg. Stupid. I growled, careful to keep myself subdued. She didn't say anything, just looked at me. I avoided her gaze, with wetness in my eyes and pressure all around me. Her own expression was mixed, contemplative, disgusted, concerned. When she spoke, it was with such heavy antagonism, but tethered by a will to listen and understand. How long? She shivered. I released my fist. By now, almost 8 or 9 months. A lot of pieces were falling into place for her. Tell me more. More? About the demon. About Alice? Everything. I blinked. You don't think I'm crazy? If you told me this yesterday, then yes, of course I would think you were crazy. But after that, She gestured to the space where she had been cowering, and her entire body quaked. I stuttered. I gotta be honest, Don. It's a lot to take in. But you will tell me the truth, right? I heard her speak, but couldn't take my eyes off her. All I could see was a shadow overlapping her face, a ghastly image of what may have happened if I didn't come to. My heart raced, and a dry burn engulfed my eyes. I bit the inside of my cheek and nodded. The truth. Alice is what's known as a tuffle. They're like this energy with a mind of their own, and the old man's sin gives them to troubled children. The tuffle feed off their bad lives, and when the kids' emotions crumble, the tuffle takes over and kills people who are cruel to them. They kill people who were... I could see she was piecing things together and didn't like the picture it painted. I interrupted her thought process. But that's not all. Like I said, sin gives tuffle to children, meaning there's more than just one. The tuffle are hunting each other, slaughtering their siblings for power. She winced slightly. And you're a part of this? So, you are hunting them as well? She questioned. I shook my head. No, I've done everything I could to avoid the fight since the beginning. But tuffle have found me before. I had to fight off and kill 2 of them. She scoffed, almost impressed, but still in morbid disbelief. You killed demons? I told you it's insane, but that's the truth. A teardrop I had been fighting dripped down my face. In the beginning, I thought I was doing the right thing. Everyone that hurt me got what they deserved, but revenge itself only proved how wrong the concept was. I would take it back. I would do things differently if I had the choice. But I can't. And now, I'm out of time. I whimpered, and more tears fell. I have cried in front of Tansu more than anyone in my life. In all this time we've lived together, she broke down barriers and picked apart my deepest insecurities, my flaws, and my shattered emotions. And every time, she was right there to hold me or give me encouraging words when I couldn't be consoled. Now, she kept her defenses raised and didn't budge. Cautiously, she asked, Why would your demon want to hurt me? I pinched my nose. The snot squished and I snorted it back. Because tuffle gets stronger whenever they kill. Especially if it's someone important to the host. Something went wrong inside my head and she got confused. This shouldn't have happened. We had an understanding. I would never allow her to harm you or anyone I care about. My lungs seized, and the anguish of my soul tormented me. I almost couldn't stop her. I looked at my hand, raising it slightly into view, and detailed the spot where the ring had been. It broke at school today, and dissolved in my pocket. Darkness under my eyes prodded more despair. She leaned in slightly, compassionate front. Kim? This time, my body became taut. No, Tan! Nothing is safe. My teeth grit, and I whisper screamed. I can't be trusted. And now they could find us again. I held my hand up, gesturing where the ring was, even though she wouldn't understand what I meant. My voice cracked. It's all falling apart. I huffed. My back rose aggressively as I tried to suck in the air. She reached out one hand and placed it calmly on my knee. I jerked, but eased myself. We locked eyes, mine dripping tears and hers shimmering with my image. It isn't, Kim. I'm alive. You didn't lose. There was a static charge between us. Hostile but forgiving, like a perfect sphere made of serrated saw blades. Does anyone else know? She asked tenderly. I shook my head and she gave an almost relieved sigh. Okay. I understand. You think you're clever, but you never really fooled me. The little lies, the inconsistencies. I always knew things were more than they seemed, but never imagined this. She smiled softly. Please, don't hate me, I whispered disgracefully. My body hunched forward and my hair fell freely. Guilt came over me like a tidal wave. I'm sorry. I'm not a bad person. I'm not. She paused, then eased the next words out with a soothing, dulcet voice. No, you're not bad. Bad things happened to you, and you did the best you could. How can you say that like it's some sort of excuse? I've done terrible things. There's more evil inside me than anything redeemable, I shakily admitted, thinking back to that cage. That isn't true. What I saw, it terrified me. I feel sick at the thought. But it wasn't you. Not really. Not my Kimmy. She sympathetically smiled. Hot tears swelled beneath my eyes. I didn't fight them. Her breathing was prominent, short, and balanced through her little nostrils. To my surprise, she sat up from her bed and moved to my right side, sinking into the mattress beside me and resting really close. My eyes went wide, trembling. She then whispered, I won't damn you for your mistakes. You've been through so much in such a short life, and we're put in a really bad situation. The fact that you've lived with this, battled it, for so long, shows how strong you are. Stronger than me. Her sorrowful eyes tracked over to the window. My wet face looked up at her while my lower lip quivered. What does that mean? I huffed. Her eyes narrowed and she bit her lower lip. You and I have had many conversations about family and both our pasts. And all those sleepless nights and dinner table banters, you never asked about him. Your dad? I assumed. Well, you and your mom never talked about him, so it wasn't my place to ask. I appreciate that respect. Her posture reduced even more. He passed away more than 2 years ago. Almost 3 now, actually. I didn't take it well. I became rude, irritable, hateful even. I closed up and suffered in my own little pitiful world, never letting anyone in. She admitted, and I resonated on a level I never thought possible. But you never hurt people because of it. You didn't allow a fucking demon into your life for some twisted revenge. I did hurt people, just not in the same way. Besides, a part of me thinks if I was presented with that opportunity, at just the right moment, I would have given in to temptation. Don't say that. I shook my head. You're not like me. You'd be surprised, she scoffed. After he died, I ruined every one of my relationships because I was so distraught. I barely pulled back enough to keep my mom in my life. Now, I could never face those people again. That's why we moved here, to start over. But you turned your life around. You put in the effort to fix it and strived for relationships again. You showed me what it meant to be kind and compassionate since the beginning, against all odds. My lips were dry, my lungs stifled, and my hands became clammy. The queasiness in my gut slowly dissipated from the effect her words had on my soul. She tilted slightly, then committed to leaning. Her shoulder touched mine, and the side of her head gently pressed against mine as well. I felt her warmth, her confliction, and her resolve. My body ached to flee, but my soul intertwined with the eminent spirit she unknowingly filtered. She started again with a heartfelt whisper. I know you're scared. I can see it when you stare out the window, when you can't sleep, when you don't eat, when you go off on your own for hours without a word. Now I know. My hushed, hollow words followed. Are you trying to convince me that you care? Or yourself? She didn't say anything, then pressed her weight into me even more, providing a comfort in a time of distress for the both of us.
I didn't understand. For her to accept this as it was presented and remain this close to me, it doesn't make any sense. Is she delirious? Does she think this is a dream? Am I dreaming?
I'm sorry, Tansu. I'm sorry for everything. I apologized. You're only human. She sounded tired. A tiredness that I knew came from my toxic energy in this room. I exhaled through my nose. Only human. I repeated over and over in my head. I crooked my head and allowed myself to breathe, to process. Tonight, I was perhaps seconds away from murdering my family again. I had a nightmare, I whispered. I always have them, but this time was different. It was surreal and vivid. I raised my hand again, looking at the little red spot from the ring. She looked as well, now understanding it held some importance. She spoke. You know, I always wondered where that ring came from. Was it important? I spaced out for a moment, feeling like my body was made of a fine mist, slowly being carried away by a persistent current of air. A chirp of the smoke detector outside of the hallway reestablished my conscience, and a mental image of that wind chime was painted. It was. I considered Chrism's face, then lowered my hand. Tansu. Her breathing rattled in my ears. Yes. I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep Alice under lock and key. But if you ask me to, I'll leave right now. She lifted her head off of me and placed both her hands in her lap. I awaited her response in deafening silence, anxious. You don't trust yourself, she replied in monotone. No, I don't. The fact that this happened at all means it's unsafe. I fearfully sighed. Then she did something I never thought she would. She pulled her left leg onto the bed and sat on her foot, turning to face me completely. Then she placed both of her delicate hands on either side of my face and held me steadily facing her. My eyes went wide, and hers slightly peered. There she gazed deep into my irises, and I was fixated on hers as well. She held that position for 30 seconds without moving, without a word. I trust you. She smiled and released my face. A warm sensation tickled my spine, and my skin bubbled with goosebumps. My teeth chattered just behind my lips as they pressed tight and a grin returned. She yawned, crooking her head back and finishing with a low yelp. Then a pained wince preceded a minor desaturation of her skin. Do you feel okay? My stomach hurts a little. I feel really tired. That's a side effect of Alice, her taking over. You should go back to sleep, I suggested, throat airy. A nod.
I think I want to sleep in tomorrow.
I patted her leg and stood myself up. A numbness in my back made it hard to find my balance. She got up, keeping me tight in her peripheral, and moved back to her bed. I rounded the foot of mine and placed myself in front of the door. As she started to climb under the blankets, she noticed me there and paused. What are you doing? I shut my eyes, holding my breath and aligning with the static in the air. My back was to her. I just need some air. I peeked over my shoulder. She returned a worried glance. I felt the words lodge in my throat and begin to foam, the realization fully setting in and coating my skin with hot nerves. I admitted, I need to talk to Alice. Her glistening, shadowed eyes held me in view, and I could sense the intrigue swell. She licked her lips and slowly rolled the blanket over her legs. Her head lowered to the pillow, and she rolled over, facing the door as I left the room. Immediately, the smoke detector beeped at my presence. I left the door open a crack and let out a shallow breath. Alice's buzz warbled in the back of my head and deafened my ears briefly. I looked around, peering through the opaque darkness and outlining every piece of furniture until I settled on the microwave underlight above the stove. The soft yellow glow reached as far as it could, casting deep pillars of dark from the island and dining room chairs. So quiet. My socked feet scraped over the carpet until I reached the front door. I stepped outside, submerging myself in the expanse of black, cloudy infinity. The door shut without a noise, and I sat on the bricks, legs folded crisscross and elbows resting on my knees, leaning forward. I could feel the shaking at my core as it coiled around every vein and muscle. Rage, betrayal, cynicism. I shut my eyes and completely ignored the naked world around me, and instead choosing to focus entirely on her face. She glared back at me, curious and lacking remorse. Her nostrils flared and arms folded. My heart spiked, and I spoke in my head, in case of the off chance that Tansu followed and was listening.
You bitch. What were you thinking?
She flashed her teeth.
Don't put the blame on me alone. You and I were conversing, remember?
She stated.
I remember throwing up after school. I remember Kari making me tea and you telling me that you preferred honey over sugar because you liked the texture. Then we played cards and watched movies before going to bed. That's what I remember.
I listed furiously. Her arms uncrossed and she jabbed the black nail at me.
You weren't asleep that long. I saw you standing in here, right here, with me. You were freaking out about Sin and the ring and asked me how to survive. I told you to kill your friend.
She was clearly irked by this confusion.
And I thought, hey, finally we're making progress. Whatever you saw wasn't me. You should have known better.
I snarled. She licked her teeth and began plucking at the stitches.
You know how fucked we are, right?
My anger lessened and a disgruntled slum layered over me.
The ring is gone. Which means they will find us. A Tuffle, if not Sin himself. We're strong, though.
I boasted with minimal confidence.
No, we aren't. Maybe we can manage a Tuffle, but not Sin. You know I'm right. Killing your friend and her mother will make us strong. Perhaps strong enough to challenge him.
My knees came together, and I wrapped my arms around my shins.
You better shut up right now. If you hurt Tansu, then what? You'll pout and be angry with me? Please, I couldn't care less.
My gut twisted. A wriggling sharp jab made its way under my skin, triggering a cynical grin.
I've told you before. I meant it then, and I mean it now. I will kill myself. I promise you. If anything happens to her, her mom, or Joey, I'll drag us both into the ditch. Get that through your thick skull.
I threatened. She stared into nothingness with a tight look of frustrated disbelief. Wordless, hopeless. I raised my head and saw the thin sheet of purple vigor wash over my eyes. I could see through the trees across the street, the mysteries lying in wait. I began to sift through my options. I've spent countless nights coming up with plans and backup plans, but was always too selfish to follow through with anything. Tansu says she trusts me, but it's too late for that. I know what I have to do, but I'm not sure I have the strength to do it. I sighed, redirecting my gaze to the clouds. I stared for a minute, then two. By the third consecutive look without blinking, I started to see the stars through the gray layers. Little air holes poked my personal container painted black. So small, so insignificant, meaningless. I blinked.
It's pointless.
Alice breathed patiently.
What is? All of this.
I shook my head.
The ring was my escape, my gift. But it's gone now, and I can't bear the thought of putting them in danger. From you, from myself, or from any other bastard that would make a move. Staying here to protect them was always your crux. What are you trying to say?
My blood burned, and every nerve in my body became cold and distant. I pictured their faces, all of them, even Stacy. Every mistake that I had made and the attempts at repentance that could never wash away the gore. My hand wrapped around the opposite wrist, and I squeezed tight, trying to force the words that have always lingered in my soul.